I'm going to micro assess just adding that unit. So in other words, how much rent will adding that unit? I mean, you could go through a complex calculation. You could say, well, the property was worth $1 million, and if I add the garden suite, it's not just adding the $250,000 in value I spent, it's actually adding 400. Welcome back to the REI Hot Seat. Andrew Hines here to talk to you about accessory dwelling units and what Bill 23 did several months back, and an opportunity that exists right now in the marketplace. And I've heard that even hedge funds and various different funds are actually starting to look at Ontario real estate because of this bill. Like, this is actually going to change things. Like, we're going to see funds maybe potentially like Blackstone or what have you, maybe just maybe potentially starting to buy up residential real estate, and with the plan of doing these type of added units. So I wanted to show you a little bit of the background on it if you're not already familiar, and then we can dig into a case study that I just went over with a guest on my podcast, Zach Britton. We came up with something north of 9% for a cap rate on the opportunity. So say you already own the lot, there's a potential there of 9% or higher on the cap rate, which is mind-blowing. Today, we just don't see that. I crunch a lot of numbers on this show, and I don't really see that. Of course, it means you're going to get into a little bit of building, but maybe, just maybe, it's worth it for you. So a little bit of background. If you look here on my screen, so the big terminology here is creating a situation where you have as of right ability to add units. So up to 3 units for a lot. This was passed province-wide, and basically that means you don't need a zoning amendment to go ahead with the build. Now, with that said, check with your local municipality, because I literally just saw a correspondence with the City of London, and they're saying we're not allowing this yet. If it's like it was with the duplex, with the additional dwelling unit bylaw that came in 2017, it took years for some municipalities to actually play ball and implement it. They were given a deadline. Actually, I think it was even back earlier than 2017. I think 2017 was their deadline, but it was passed many years before that. It could take some time before this one comes into effect. Zach said that it is working right now in Kitchener. So we went through a Kitchener example. Check with your municipality. It might just be a lucrative opportunity. For Zach in Kitchener, he said the sweet spot was something that would be at least 43 wide and 110 deep. And every municipality is different. You have setback requirements. You have gross floor area maximums. So if your lot is, 10,000 square feet and you have a gross floor area of, 25%, then you're allowed 2,500 square feet of footprint on that lot. So keep that in mind. You'll want to check with your local municipality. Looking at the overview here, we've got our minister's message at the top. Basically, the idea here is that they want to make it cheaper to add more houses, which, if you've been following the housing crisis in Ontario, it makes a lot of sense that we would want to be able to add more units. And generally speaking, that's how they're advertising this one, whether or not it plays out that way. So let's go ahead and jump into the numbers here for the deal that we were talking about with Zach. Now, this was just a generalized example, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So before I dig into these numbers, I want to give the disclaimer that this is just theoretical at this point. Always do your own due diligence, but I isolated the opportunity. So say I already own something. I'm not going to evaluate the opportunity to buy the whole house that I already own. I'm going to micro assess just adding that unit. So in other words, how much rent will adding that unit provide me? How much more expenses will it cost me? And what will it cost me to actually do the addition? I'm going to have to service that. And you have to think about this. Like, if it's in the backyard, you have to run services. You've got to get water out there. You've got to get electric. You've got to get gas and sanitary. There's a lot that you need to make happen. And that means, for most, it's going to mean probably either trenching up to the back of the house and drilling a hole in the back of the house and catching the main stack in the existing building, or trenching all the way around the building. So one of those is going to have to happen. You're going to want to look at the individual property you have and see if it makes sense. But this isn't just for people who already own the property. You can, of course, look at these as a deal on the market. What if I'm going to add an extra unit? And you can see, I'm just analyzing this one as an isolated. So Zach said for a real nice 700 square foot, 2-bedroom unit in Kitchener, he would be able to potentially get $2,400 a month in rent, which definitely seems reasonable based on what I've seen in other municipalities. Granted, I'm no Kitchener-Waterloo expert. Less vacancy, I just threw a 1% in there, but I mean, it's pretty tight out there for getting properties. There's not going to be too much vacancy, but yes, it can happen. This is where we started digging into what's the extra cost. So if I'm going to get that extra $2,400 a month, how much a year in extra taxes am I going to be assessed? You got to remember, the municipality is going to reassess your property. You are going to pay more taxes after you do this. And sometimes it can be many years later that they actually do the assessment. That happened to me recently, and I had 3 years of back taxes to pay. So it will happen. Just keep that in mind. Insurance, I figure an extra $1,000. I'm figuring an extra $1,000 for taxes and insurance. If you wanted to be super conservative, you could say maybe even $2,000 on the taxes, but I'm just going to leave it at $1,000 for now. Maintenance, I'm going to leave the 5% in there. It's going to be new construction, but you could play with that one. Management, I'm just put like a 1% filler in there if you're going to self-manage to pay for some of your self-management tools, if you have any specific software that you use. Of course, if you know you're going to use a manager, add that cost in. But if you're already getting a building managed, odds are you can probably build in that additional unit. 3 units, managers are probably going to start considering giving you a discount because you've got multiple tenants on one site. Here's hoping anyway. I've been able to get some great deals in the past. It's all about building those relationships. Landscape and snow, I threw $100 in here as an extra. I mean, keep in mind, you're not adding more land. We're talking about plopping a garden suite at the back of the property. So if you're going to do that extra dwelling unit, we're talking like basically a 700 square foot house in the backyard. The real concerns are going to be the existing tenants. Are they going to be okay with you adding in this unit? You're probably going to have to negotiate with them, talk to them, potentially offer them an out on their lease. If they're not in the middle of a lease, maybe propose a situation to them that would work. It's going to require a little bit of crafty negotiation, but it can be done. And then I just threw $100 in there for miscellaneous, something I might have missed. So if it costs $250,000 to build this unit, that's a 9.83% cap rate, meaning for every dollar invested, when you take no debt, theoretically, that's going to bring in almost 10% return annually. So pretty wild. Now, if we finance it, now is where we can make that cash on cash return really jump. So I made some assumptions here. I'm assuming we're going to get 75% on the additional unit. So, I mean, you could go through a complex calculation. You could say, well, the property was worth $1 million. And if I add the garden suite, it's not just adding the $250,000 in value I spent. It's actually adding $400,000. That may be the case in your municipality. Crunch the numbers that way if you like. In this case, let's just assume that we only get 75% of the $250,000 it costs to build the unit. That's what I'm basing that cap rate on. It could be much, much better than that, but let's just assume that we're only going to get 75%. And 30-year amortization, I'm going to go ahead and put that in there for now, but we can play with that. 5.4% interest rate. I just made a rough estimate based on the bond yields being down a little bit lately. So that's a monthly payment of just over $1,000. So this isn't like you can mortgage this property separately. It's part of your main title on the property. So what I'm treating this as is a blend and increase. So say I'm with CIBC, I go back to CIBC and I say, I've added value to my property. Could you please give me 75-80% of the current value? They go out and do their appraisal, and then they do what's called a blend and increase. And then I'm just doing on the difference. So if they increase my mortgage by $187,500 at a 30-year AM at 5.4%, that's an additional amount added to my payment of $1,045.89. So that works out to be on the decision. We're just isolating the decision. If I decided to add an accessory dwelling unit to this hypothetical property in Kitchener, I'd be looking at about $1,000 a month in cash flow, which is pretty wild. I have not seen that kind of opportunity come across this show. Granted, it's micro, it's small, it's 1 unit. But if you do enough of them, that can add up, and maybe you start buying up a whole bunch of these types of properties and adding these additional units. So something to consider. Looking at the overall return, we've got a bit of pay down on the mortgage. I'm going back to assuming that properties are going to appreciate again, for better or for worse. That's sort of the nature of things when you have inflation is that, and immigration, eventually we've got to come back to properties starting to go up in value again. So I just keep it at 2% like I always have. Mortgage pay down, we've got that combining with our appreciation. And then we have our cash on cash return, our cash flow, 18% plus. So that's if you just funded that and took the 75% additional mortgage, you're looking at 18% cash on cash. Again, don't see that very often on this show when we're talking Ontario numbers and really any numbers in modern real estate markets right now. So that works out to be a 30% return on investment. Of course, I have land transfer tax in here, which, if you already own the property, you're not actually paying that. But it's in here anyway, nonetheless. So some things you could play with, like what if I only get a 25-year amortization? Well, that brings it down to 918. What if I pay, 5.75? That could bring it down to, 875. We might as well just do some conservative estimates here. What if I choose to get management, 6%? Obviously that changes things, but not that much. 750, still positive cash flow. In the grand scope of things you could invest in Ontario right now, I think this is a real opportunity. It takes a team to be able to pull something like this off. First off, if you've never done an addition or a conversion where you've added a secondary dwelling unit, when we're talking about adding a third, I don't expect the permitting process to really be any different. You're going to get drawings done up just the same way you would, HVAC designs. I may do an episode just on that in the future because I've had some people ask for that. But again, seems like a real opportunity. I'm curious what you think. Let me know what you think of what Bill 23 is doing. Is this something you're excited about? Are you one of the ones that's upset about it? Because many people are upset about it, specifically at a political level, because they're saying that it's going to make their revenue hurt because there's other elements to this bill that are going to affect what development charges municipalities can charge and things of that nature. But let me know what you think. Leave some comments in the comments below, and I will see you on the next episode.